Hello, this is your host Val with the VK Career Conversation. The reason I decided to do this is that we all come from a place of insecurity when we're trying to figure out or just not knowing where we want to go with our career. What do I want to do? What's my next move with my career? Why am I feeling stuck here with what I'm doing? I remember when I started off in my career, I had no idea what I was doing, what I wanted to do. I want everyone to feel comfortable coming on. We will have professionals talking to you, myself, and others. We'll be consistent. We will feed your soul. We want you to ask questions. But I just think it's a platform that will allow you to really feel comfortable gaining information so that you can move forward in your career. You're listening to VK Career Conversations with Val. Be sure to tune in the first Monday of every month at 8 a.m.
Hello. Good morning, you guys.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. I know you guys are probably surprised to not see Miss Val here. I'm taking the reins over. I might just take over this whole show. Who knows?
There you go. Don't be shy.
Yeah, so this is Abigail here to fill in as best as I can. No one's as good as the lovely Miss Carter, of course. But today we're going to be talking about working with family. And so a little bit before the show, I was talking with Dr. Pinkston, and I know Dr. Pinkston has probably a little bit more experience with this than I do. And so I want Dr. Pinkston to kick us off and take the reins a little bit today.
All I can say is, whoo, do I have some experience with that? And it's an interesting experience. Day, I don't know how much you have to work with family. But
not as much as you. I'm here to learn. It's a new thing for me. So yes, I'm here to learn like the rest of us on the show today.
There's so many different aspects to working with family. So if you own a business and you work with your spouse, or you're a kid coming in to take over for your parents. If you are just, I think about my sister-in-laws. I have two sister-in-laws that own a UPS store together, and they're, equal partners and co-owners with two completely different personalities. And on top of that, they've hired like my daughter and their son, and, and all in the family. I mean, it is, there's so many different ways that, you can wind up working with family. But I think when it comes down to it, no matter what situation you're in, it's just a dynamic. And like I was telling you, Abigail, I think the thing about family is they know how to pull your trigger. So a whole different level emotionally. When you're working in an environment where you've got, lots of professionals around you, there's lots of different personalities, and you have to learn how to do that. But when you are working with family, it gets into a whole different level because, again, people, they know you better and they know how to pull that trigger with you, and you can get more emotional about things. And I think that is probably the biggest part of working with family that can be an obstacle, so to say. Understand?
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that your siblings hired their kids, because that's something that I want to do. So that's a unique dynamic to be able to, hire your kids, whether some kids don't want anything to do with their family business.
Right.
Some kids are like, yes, they are grooming themselves to be the next leader. So it's like that dynamic of making sure you're honoring your kids' wishes, but also giving them an opportunity to build wealth in your business.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. And as I mentioned, I'm just getting into it. I was just having a conversation with my husband actually this week that I need to make him my CFO. So much of his strengths are in, the finances, and I'm just like, man, I want to bring him in. And I think that when you're working with family, most times they do have your best interests, whether your spouse or your parents. So if it's a good dynamic that won't ruin the relationship, then I think that it's something to consider.
Right.
Do you agree, ladies?
Yeah. I think that's like ideal, right? Like when you kind of think of the American dream, you think about like starting a family business and, passing it down, the generational wealth kind of aspect of it. I think that's definitely ideal. But we live in a very different world than that, and I think people are very like individualistic and, I watch a lot of like those court shows, like Judge Faith, Judge Judy, Support Court, all those things, right? And like people will sue their family members, you know what I'm saying? And so when you mix business with something like that, it can kind of, I think, complicate things. And I think greed plays a big role into it as well. So I think that's why a lot of people don't go into it, because like you can trust somebody, but still have your guard up in that way, because you don't know how money can change people. If you start a multi-million-dollar business with your second cousin twice removed, and then now you have to take them to court, or, I don't know all that legal stuff. I try to avoid it, but all that can get involved too. And I think that's when family bonds get tied and people have to pick sides. And again, I think I'm looking at one extreme side of it because I watch all those terrible TV shows.
The media has a way of, blowing things up and taking the worst possible scenarios. And I think that that's not, true in every case. It can work very successfully. I think the issue is multiple. And, we talked about boundaries in the show, and you have to have great communication skills and great boundaries. And you have to know that your friends or family members or anybody that you're working with that's close need to understand there's a difference between our personal relationship and our business relationship. And keeping that distinction is very, very difficult. The more you know somebody, the closer that you are to somebody. Holding those boundaries are very difficult. And I think, like we talked about at the beginning, I think the biggest piece that I had to learn out of it was just communication and forgiveness.
Yeah.
So the forgiveness side of it is, I think most people have heard, if you've tuned in to us before, that, I have a medical practice. I'm a medical doctor and I own my own practice. But my business partner is my ex-husband. So, mind-blowing situation, because we went through a terrible divorce and were literal enemies. But we realized at some point that, we loved each other and married each other for a reason. We had children together. We have a responsibility to our children. Neither one of us, we were in business together before the divorce, and then we were split at that point, and neither one of us were doing very well after. He has his set of talents. I have my set of talents. And so, we realized we just needed to get our big girl panties and big boy panties on, and or boxers, and bring it together in a way where, look, I forgive you for these things. And this has nothing to do with the fact that we have children to raise. And we need to rebuild, or we lost everything. We have to rebuild our individual retirements and find a way for us to exist and live beyond this. And so it was quite a feat for us to pull this all together. And it took him being a big person, took me being a big person. We still have our odds and all. We can't deny that. But really what it's all about is boundaries and communication and forgiveness. Those are the three things I think that kind of play that role and make that successful.
Yeah. I've never had to work with family members. I don't have a super big family. Like I'm an only child, you know what I'm saying? So I don't have like siblings and stuff. And all my like distant family kind of lives in different states. So I never really had to deal with that too much. But me and my mom recently started a radio show here on LV Val Radio. And, but we do it from home. So, we both kind of went in on some equipment and all the like programs and stuff that you need. Like we're pretty 50-50 in terms of like the financial cost of it. But like, and I plan these like meetings with my mom, and I live with my mom too. So I find that like sometimes I try to like keep our conversations about the radio show and like maybe more like projects or more ideas during those meetings, because like when I'm hanging out with her at home, or if I'm just at home, I might not necessarily want to, because I see it as like work essentially, right? Because like this is something that we're working on that I have to put energy into. And it's the same thing that I do for work. You know what I'm saying? It's a similar type of thing. So while I do want to do that with and for my mom, sometimes I have to tell her like, okay, make a note. We'll talk about it during our meeting. Like little, chit chats here and there are fine. But sometimes she'll get really excited about something. And I'm like, I'm not in the headspace
I'm not in the mode.
Right, to be creative in that way, or to feel like I can tack on something else at this moment. You know what I'm saying? So I've had to like set those boundaries with her, like, and I'll schedule a meeting literally with my mom who I live with. I'll schedule a meeting for us to talk about that specifically, just to kind of keep that balance of you're my mom and we are family and we have a relationship versus we're working on this like project together too.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's there's the boundary issue. Absolutely. Because moms can get their feelings hurt,
Yes. And I try not to like shoot her down, like I'll hear her out, but then I can be really honest and say, I'm not in the headspace to talk work stuff right now. And to her, because she doesn't do it for work, it's just like this fun, creative project that she can do. But, as the person who kind of does the more technical stuff of it, I'm like, she's like, let's do merch. And I'm like, okay, I have to design that. So like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I hear you. Let's talk about it when I'm like more in a headspace, and we'll like work our way to that kind of thing. So I've had to like kind of talk to her about that. And she talked about wanting to go to maybe starting a business with together or whatever. And I was like, I don't think you understand how bossy I am. Like I'm pretty bossy, and I'm your daughter, and I don't know if you can handle that.
I bet she does know how bossy you are.
She raised you to be that strong, independent woman. That's funny.
That's my mom in the comments. She said she does squash me.
I like what you mentioned though, because even family, it's nice to have different dynamics. Like you said, Dr. Pinkston, your ex-husband brings a unique dynamic to the business. You and your mom, Abby, are different, and she's more creative, and visionary. You're probably more of like execution. That's what I'm kind of getting, the planner. And so it's nice to have that in family, because you can, like I said, trust them to have things that are going to move you forward, help you grow, all the things. So,
and using each other's strengths too. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, she kind of brings the like creative, not that I'm not creative, but that she brings that kind of different side to things that I can use to make my kind of side of it easier too. So we are a good balance. I just have to tell her sometimes, I'm like, I'm not ready on this Saturday morning to talk about this right now. Like, let's talk about it on our meeting.
And that's where, family can be. And then, if we kind of or spin this a little bit and get today now, wanting to, hire children and whatnot. So, mom and daughter working together, and then, you own your business and you're wanting to, hire your children in, sometimes kids are open to that and sometimes they're not. I think kids are new to the idea of those types of boundaries and splitting that professional, personal, relationship. And that might be a good starting place for them to learn. The thing that I would want to teach my kids is that, when we're at the office, I'm not mom, I'm Dr. Pinkston. And this is how you address me, or these are how you do these things. But this is a good place for them to learn some of those manners and rules and things like that in a safe environment, where, you're not just going to up and fire your kid and for something they can kind of learn in that environment. So, that might be a good way as a starting role for kids to get going if they're not interested in taking over the family business at some point. That is a unique role, but they do have to know that there is a difference between your home and your work environment, and and teach those lines. It's a little fine line to walk sometimes.
And even like when I was younger and I played like soccer, my dad coached the soccer team or whatever, and he's like, don't call me dad, you have to call me coach, because he didn't want there to be any sort of like weird favoritism or weird dynamic, or when you call someone something, you maybe associate other fatherly type things. And he goes, I want to keep it like you're I'm coaching you in this aspect, or I'm your dad in this at home or whatever. So yeah, I think definitely like how you said, Dr. Pinkston, like not having them call you mom, and it might slip here and there, especially like if you go into their office or something and it's like, and you maybe talk about something personal, like, oh my gosh, my sister just texted me or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like things like that. But, you know, in meetings and when you're around other people, to be more mindful of that, I think that can definitely help too, because that's when the lines get blurred.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have my siblings are, well, my older sibling, she's an entrepreneur, so is her ex-husband too, and her kids work for, one kid works for her and the other kid kind of works for the dad. And I've gotten feedback from them because I'm always curious, because I think, like I said, I want my kids to work with me. You know, how is their relationship? And they say a little bit about what you say, Abby, like they would like to have distinct lines and boundaries. And one of them gave feedback that they felt like the relationship sometimes felt transactional, because when they see you walk through the door, they're like, we need to do this, and this, and not, hey son, how you doing? You know,
right? Yeah,
business. And so I think I'm mindful of that if I'm bringing my kids or even my husband or sisters in, to make sure that I'm keeping the relationship first, and then business, you know, as something that we set time aside to do. Is that something that you recommend, Dr. Pinkston, or how did you navigate that?
Yeah, it is. I haven't really had much of the opportunity to have my kids join in because, you know, it's a medical practice, and they, you know, I don't think that that's something they want to necessarily follow me and do. You know, we've had them come in and do some scanning after hours and work paperwork and things like that. But during the active part of it, we also have to worry about HIPAA. You know, there are legal laws and things like that we have to follow so that, you know, patient information is protected and whatnot. So, you know, there's a lot of differences there. But I think if, you know, if I have I feel like I've done really well with my children to teach them that there are different levels to relationships, that, you know, no, you can't always get away with the things that you think you should be able to get away with just because, you know, I'm your mom and I'm the doctor.
Yeah.
Oh, Mom, I'm in this school today. Can you write me a doctor's note? Are you sick? You're not a doctor's note just because you want to stay home, or, you know, things like that. So it's in every aspect of our lives, you know, how to keep that, you know, how to keep that boundary with them. So entering in the workplace would be a new place for them to start with me. But I feel like we've prepped them up a little bit to be able to understand those differences. Starts at home, starts young, you know.
Yeah.
You got to teach them. I coach my daughter's soccer team as well. When she learned that just because you're the coach's daughter doesn't mean you're going to, in fact, it will be harder on you probably.
Exactly. I'm like, I almost don't want I wouldn't want them to be my coach.
That would be harder on you than everything else, actually. So
I have noticed that, like, if you have a connection to somebody in a place of authority, whether it be like your best friend or you guys are family, whatever, that I sometimes feel like a lot of times to combat not playing favorites, that they are actually harder on you. And I'm like, why are you actually being way meaner to me than you are to anybody else right now? That's not fair.
That's it. I think it's that, you know, that potential for favoritism. You can really get accused of that very quickly. And
I think also too, you feel like your people that you're connected to are a reflection of you. So if you're in a position of authority and you feel like maybe more eyes are on you, or maybe there's more pressure on you, and, you know, people know, everybody talks, right? So like if they know, like if you're in a place of business and let's say your best friend is your employee and you're their boss or whatever, and you guys, everyone knows you guys are best friends. If your best friend acts out, I feel like it almost looks worse on the person, like the best friend who's above you authority wise, because it's like, well, why was your best friend acting up? Why does she think that that's okay? So I also think it's that added layer of like, if you mess up, it makes me look bad because of our connection too.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see, Abby, I'm going to play you today. I see some comments in the chat.
Ooh, okay. Which one?
There's some people just saying, hello. Howard is asking about today's topic.
Yes. Howard, we are talking about working with family. And the ins and outs, the pros and the cons and all that. And then, yes, we have some people saying hello to us. We're sitting at 2488 right now, almost 2,500 viewers.
Sweet. Oh my gosh, thank
Love
you.
it, love it. Welcome, everybody.
Betty asked, does work-related disagreement affect your personal life? And I'm going to take a step further and ask vice versa. If you are having a personal issue,
Yeah.
do you let it affect your work life? Let's speak on that.
Yeah, especially if family is involved, because absolutely, I think that if you're again, I'll think put my sister-in-law's business and my daughter working for them. There are times where she will vent to me something about, well, I feel like they are treating the others differently and harder on me because we're family, and that she doesn't feel like there's sometimes always some fairness or whatnot, and I try to explain to her that you can't allow those personal feelings into any of the work environment. That's where the emotions take off. And I said, first of all, you're probably overthinking things. You think that that's what they're thinking because you know them so well. They might not be thinking that at all. They're in work mode. That's a whole different level than personal mode with you. And so any of those kind of disagreements that she feels like are going on, she'll bring that into her personal space. And she'll sometimes spend days, ruminating about it and thinking about it. I'm like, sweetheart, you've got to learn how to separate, those two things and quit putting thoughts in people's heads. You don't know what they're thinking. And if you're concerned about something, ask, talk to them. Find a good time, first of all. Find not in the middle of business and whatnot, but find a good time. Ask them to speak to them later about it. You have something you're concerned about. You'd like to talk to them about it. Let them choose a good time and sit down and get in that space and take the family personal part out of it and just say, I felt like maybe this is what's going on or what happened. Can you explain to me what you meant or, how we might better handle that later? But I told her you can't really take that into your personal space. So I'm not sure if that's what they meant, but that's kind of what I think of with that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think whether or not your family's involved in your business, a lot of people, like if something's really stressing you out at work, you're going to take it home regardless if you work with your family or not. How many times have you had a rough day at work and then you to your spouse or to whoever you live with, you give them attitude. You're like, whatever, I don't even want to hear you speak right now. We already kind of do that. And so I think that is a really difficult thing to think about, right? To come home and we work together and we disagree on this decision, or maybe you made a mistake that is weighing heavy on the business and I'm already upset with you and now I have to go home and eat dinner with you. At least with work people, you get to step away and to be okay, at least I don't have to see you until Monday. But it's now I got to spend the whole weekend with you too.
Right. Well, what you're discussing is the kind of this Rosemarie, I believe, her question about, if we work with our spouse, what kind of difficulties might we face? And I think that, the prime example of that, the what we kind of mentioned at the beginning about just, being bigger than your problem and communicating well, making sure that you keep a professional and personal boundary separate, because I think when you work with your spouse or anybody, that you're very close to, you know them very well, they know you very well. And again, those triggers, they can yank your chain very easily and you can get very emotional about it and have a reaction rather than a thought process and a response. So, working with your spouse, those are things that, you just have to catch yourself and make sure that you're not, reacting to things emotionally. That will take you down very, very hard. And just you keep that communication line open. Again, that forgiveness aspect. I know you wouldn't mean to do harm to me or the practice or whatnot. That's not what this is about. There's something else. There's something very, kind of think more practical about it. No, I know you wouldn't mean to do something. Your intent is not bad. But I think sometimes when we work with our spouses, something bad happens. We think it's their intention to do something wrong to us. And we get very emotional, respond or overreact. And really we have to remember that may not be the case at all. Just keep your communication lines open and make sure that, you don't overreact.
I had a mentor Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
I had a mentor who was saying that he and his wife were together for 40 years. They're retired now. They both were scientists. And he said, when they do, they both communicate their goals so that someone else's business goals or whatever didn't overwhelm the other person. So everyone kind of knew where it stood. Remind me of like if you're working for a company, you'll have like some KPIs, some key performance indicators. You'll have like annual review, and you make sure that everyone aligns on goals. And I think in a family dynamic and business, those things can be done similarly, where you're saying, okay, what are your goals? What do you want to do to make sure you're supporting each other and not overwhelming each other with what you have involved for the business? And because I think that'll build some resentment in a relationship and make people feel like they're not appreciated or they're taken for granted.
Right. Big. That would be a huge one. Absolutely. Yeah. I think when you work with family, there is that potential to, I don't know, harm the relationship. I think you can take it. People in their perceptions are very important, as you say. They can feel underappreciated or taken advantage of or used in some aspect. And again, I think that's more of that emotional component that we draw in when we're in relationships with people. If you go to work and somebody at work that you really don't know that well, says something a little derogatory, kind of gets on your last nerve that day or whatnot, you have the ability to just not respond and just walk away from that and separate yourself from them and think, that's just them. They're having a bad day or whatnot. You have that ability to separate yourself when you're working with family or people that you love and know very well. You don't have that ability to emotionally separate. You tend to work in more emotional thoughts and feelings into it and respond very differently than you would to somebody that you don't know that well. You just have to remember not to let that affect you once you walk out the door. That's the way it is, 9 to 5. Once you walk out that door, you're back to your personal, relationship in your personal space. You can't allow things to move over into your private time together. That's hard to do. It can hurt your relationship long term. People really try to stay away from working with family. I think often there's a lot of people who make that hard and solid rule that they will not work with friends and family. I think that's something I've heard my whole life is don't mix business with family. I don't think that has to be the absolute case. You do have to be a very strong person to do it and not let it harm your relationships with them.
Yeah. Cause like you said, if someone says something to you at work, you might not think twice of it because it's like, that's just my coworker. Right. But if your partner or your sister or your brother or your mom kind of says something, it feels like way more of a jab. You're like, well, what's wrong with you? You know me. Why are you talking to me like that? Exactly. And then Day, kind of what you said about like appreciation too. I think kind of like what I said earlier, whenever you are in an authority position over a loved one, you are harder on them because you know that they know what to expect, right? So I think also in turn, sometimes you forget to give them the same praise that you might give somebody else because you're like, well, you know me and you already know that I appreciate you. You already know that I love you. And so you don't give it as much in the professional setting because you expect them to just already know that, but they deserve the same praise and recognition as anybody else too.
Sure.
Yeah. Sometimes we don't do that for the ones we are closest to.
Absolutely. We tend to, right?
Yeah. And I feel like I put this question up from Sophie. It says, is it true involving your family in business can make your relationship weak? And I feel like we kind of just touched on that, it can, you don't have to let it, but it is something you have to, I think, really mentally prepare for and really think about like the nuances of that and be realistic of your own emotional like limits, I guess. You know what I'm saying? If you know that like you're a person who gets worked up or maybe, you take things personally. I know I'm a person who takes things personally, especially if it's someone I like really care about. And even like the slightest thing will hurt my feelings. So I don't know if I could do that,
Yeah.
It's
is sometimes I'll catch myself. The whole ex-husband thing is interesting in the work dynamic, and sometimes my office manager has been with us for 12 years, so she knows the whole story. She's been through the ups and downs of the whole thing. Most of the staff came kind of after the divorce, and they know we're divorced, but they don't really know the whole dynamic. And I have to watch myself if he comes in and steps on my toes somehow, or oversteps his bounds at some point, or something happens. I have to be real careful not to pull out all the ex-husband jokes, or the
Right.
kind of, because I undermine his authority in that way, like you just undermined mine, right? So, but you have to really be careful about those types of things. That happens a lot when you know people very well, ex-husband, family, kids, whatever.
Yeah.
Not undermine them with the personal comments or whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really thoughtful. I love that you are aware and like are intentional about doing that. So yeah,
It definitely have to do that. I like
Yeah.
the questions here about, you guys shouldn't have shown me the comments, because now I can see all this. I'm like, oh, I want to answer that.
We have another question from Sandy Park. I like this one. What's your thought on trust issues within the family business?
Big. When you brought up in the beginning about the Judge Judy's and things like that, the kind of sensationalism that can go on TV and social media and whatnot, I think people are automatically drawn to think that family, and it can be true. Family can hurt you and do things that are significant. You can, there are times where you have to walk away and end relationships with family members over some very serious things. So family, it can do harm to you in ways that you just can't imagine would ever happen. But I do think that that's more of a sensationalized idea. I've always been warned about working with family. I've done it now for 26 years, very successfully. I think it can be done. Again, I think it all boils down to boundaries, communication, and forgiveness. It's those things. But you have to be working with somebody equally as mature and capable. It's not always about how you respond and do things. It's about how they respond and do things. Are they mature enough to be in that situation? And again, that's where I think my situation very unusual with, ex-husband and ex-wife working together. There could be an enormous trust issue, and was for a very long time, significantly. But again, we just brought in our maturity on that one, and made it possible. But it takes two. It takes two. So
because it's going to benefit both of you guys too, right? If the business fails, you both fail. It's not,
fail. Our children fail.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what it's about, is, the kids and the, not just the family dynamic, but, if we don't do well, and our kids don't go to college, our kids don't have cars, our kids, don't develop well emotionally. And there's a lot of significant things that can happen if we don't, but not everybody can do that. And you can't trust, I don't care if it's a friend or a complete stranger that you hire off the street, just based on their resume and one interview. There's going to be trust issues everywhere, and you should be able to trust your friends and family more. Is that the case always? No, it certainly isn't. Sometimes it can be extremely significant in that case, but no, I think for the most part you can rely and trust the people that you know and love to work with you.
Yeah, I think that's always a gamble, right? Because like trust in that type of relationship can go two ways, right? People have a business, and maybe they have a business that they've had for 20 years, and you find out that the person that's been working with you for 15 years has been like embezzling, or I'm not exactly sure what embezzling is. I think that's stealing money. You know what I'm saying? Or stealing money, or doing something fraudulent, right? But then if that person is your partner, it's also like, how many stories do you hear about, like, someone getting cheated on with a coworker, and this is someone that you have to remain professional, because if you and your partner own a business and you find out that your partner's cheating on you with somebody at work, you have to treat that person at work. You can't change the way you treat them or the way you react to that person just because of that. So there's like two sides to it that you just have to, that you really can never know if someone is going, it really does come down to trust. Like, and do I believe that this person is going to do me wrong and stuff like that? So that's why I've never really, I'm really big on like documenting and stuff like that. And if people want to get prenups, or I don't care if that person is like your closest family member, your best friend, your twin, your, twin from the womb type thing. Like if there's a contract to sign, have them sign the contract. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And as messed up as it is to have to take somebody you care about to court, if that's what you have to do,
Right.
then that's what you have to do if someone breaks your trust.
I really think you're right about the documentation thing, and about, in any relationship you're in, whether you know somebody really well, their family, or again, just some stranger you've hired, you always have to keep your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and make sure that you have, things documented well, things that you have conversations of email, or, things like that. And just always, I don't care how much you love somebody, you always have to have, things to support you in your position and what you're trying to accomplish, so that if something does happen, you can handle it and have it taken care of.
And cover your bases. Yeah.
You do. I don't care who it is. You always have to have that. Unfortunately.
Day, do you have anything to say before we move on to the next question?
I was waiting on the next questions. I saw something.
Yeah.
What questions y'all have?
We have this one from Facebook from Caesar. It says, some company had a rule like forbidden relations in work, or some companies have a rule with forbidden relationships in work. What's your thoughts on that?
Like you can't date, and you can't date a coworker or thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of an old-fashioned rule. I think it's appropriate and I agree with it, but I don't think it's possible to completely shut that down. When you work closely with people, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, the relationships develop and feelings develop. And so it's not always possible to go from our end and dictate that you can't do that. But I think you just have to leave it incumbent upon the people in the work environment to, act professionally and have rules and boundaries, and don't overstep those things while you're at work. But that does not, that's a dream world. That does not always happen. It's not always possible.
I think companies should look at this, because I know they're trying to not make themselves liable for anything that can happen. Like if someone is harassing someone, or a breakup ends badly, sometimes one of those parties may want to blame the company. So the company has to protect themselves.
Yeah.
I also think that if it's a relationship where there's someone who is a superior, or someone who reports to someone, I do think that should be like a standard no-no, like something in their contract to say you cannot pursue a relationship with someone that reports to you or is subordinate, because that's going to make the relationship really, difficult, or may intimidate them if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
If you want to date, then you guys need to figure out who's going to leave the company. Okay. Because
right.
if it's worth it, then I've seen that happen, and you move on and do that. But I would, as a company owner, I would put that in place, that a subordinate cannot date.
Right. And because people can be very malicious when they get hurt, and say that it was sexual harassment when it was and not in all cases, but when it was actually a very mutual relationship, that, somebody gets upset or hurt, then they can turn it on them and make claims like that. And then it's hard to, that will break up the work environment intensely. There's really no way to recover from that. I do think it's I think it's more about liability for the company, really. So,
No, I agree. I think when there's that level of authority difference, that can get super duper duper sticky, and people can feel like harassed, or they can feel like they have to keep that person happy personally so that they can move forward in the job, and like you said, Dr. Pinkston, that's not to say that that relationships still don't form that way. Like true, very genuine relationships can't form that way. But then that's when you have to decide. Most people would choose family over job. If you really feel like your soulmate is your subordinate, or maybe your boss, one of you just got to get a new job. If you know what I'm saying? And that's not the end of the world. And that's very possible if that's really where your heart is taking you. But if it's just for the drama of it, then you're kind of messing with the work environment there too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I
Absolutely.
think it's yeah. And it's impossible. Relationships and emotional ties are very difficult things to deal with on a practical level. Emotions don't work on practicality always, so it's a fine line, fine line.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And conflicts can arise with just coworkers who don't even see each other outside of the workplace. Conflict already arises with that alone. So the more I can see why companies put in that rule, and maybe they put it in knowing that like not everyone's going to follow it, but it's like if they try to come after, it's more to cover their assets, right? To be like, well, we said you couldn't do it anyways, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to read some comments that we got. One is from John Nevels. He says, that's really hard actually. Despite these rules, people still don't care so much about the rules. And like you said, I think people are going further and further away from, I think especially post COVID, because you know what I'm saying? COVID kind of built this culture of like not really leaving your house
Mhm.
except to work, or for, you know, very necessary things. So if they're used to not really going out as much and the only time they can meet somebody is at work, like,
Right.
you know, there's nothing really you can do about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your emotions definitely are hard to control at that type of a level. It's not easy.
Right. And then Richard said, that might be my parents' time rule, but irony is my parents fell in love at their workplace. Yeah.
It works. It
Yeah.
works. Yeah, I've seen that happen a lot, you know,
It
in
can
my industry too. Two reps, they ended up, you know, building a life together. It's like, okay, real sweet, you know. So you
So
still have some people at work. So I mean, probably more than your family sometimes. So, you know, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's you know, you professional people know how to handle their emotions at work and away from work, and
Yeah.
most people can handle situations like that. But you spend so much time at work. I make jokes with my patients all the time. It's no longer the American dream, it's the American nightmare. I mean, we are working all of the time just to
Mhm.
a mortgage going. It's the stressors. And so, you know, when you're at work that much and spending that much time with people, they get to know you and they get to understand your, you know, it's the only place you have to talk about your hopes and dreams and wishes, or get to know somebody on a somewhat intimate level, you know, appropriate or not. All that
Yeah.
time you spend with people, relationships develop. It's something you can't control always.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Jared said, as long as you understand the room and stay true, it doesn't matter what relationship you have with people at work. That's true.
Yeah. But again, there's that maturity level.
Yeah.
People who are not that mature, you know, they are not able to you know, keep that separation emotionally. So
Yeah. And it can be hard, especially like if you're going through a breakup, you know, and I actually have a friend who told me a story of she works at a big place, like at a big company with a lot of different departments and stuff like that. And you know, some people work at they go from one department to the next or whatever. So there's a bunch of people and they're all kind of connected. And someone started dating someone from another department, and that person is just always in where they're not supposed to be in the girls like area, like in her workspace. And her boss had to come to her and say, hey, it's cute and all that y'all are together. Great. Love that for you. Hang out on your lunch break. Like, why are they? It's one thing to stop by in the morning, bring them a cup of coffee, right? Move on, say your hellos, chit chat for 5 minutes, and then keep it moving. But like to come here so frequently is like, we do not, well, this is not a rom-com. We don't want to see your relationship develop. We actually don't care.
right.
Go get lunch.
that maturity level again, you know. It's, yeah. Not
Yeah.
you can't accuse everybody of being mature. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. We'll read one more comment, then we'll kind of wrap things up with our final thoughts. One said, building life and career together doesn't seem like a bad idea.
Right. Well, that's all you can do. That's all you have is work and career in one. So again, spend all that time at work and you kind of have to pull it together to have a life. It's tough to separate the two sometimes.
It can make your relationship stronger too, I think. Yeah. And then Javier said, amazing show. So We had we got up to about, I think I got really close to 3,000 viewers today. So we're doing really, really well. I know we moved back to once a month. Rather than twice a month. And who knows, maybe at some point we can move it back up to 2 times a month as schedules clear up. Because, this is VK Career Conversations. We have very career driven, busy, boss babe women on the show who have places to be and people to see. So, you know what I'm saying? We have to schedule it when we can. But this is a really, really good show. And I liked today's topic. I was a little nervous about today's topic because I don't have a ton of experience working with family, but I actually feel like this flowed really, really well. And I really enjoyed today's conversation with you guys today.
Thank you. Same.
Yeah,
It's a
great
really
topic.
important topic. Agreed, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys want to leave the audience with anything? Day, do you want to start us off with anything you want to leave the audience with in terms of this topic, but anything in general, if anything's on your heart?
Yeah, I'm new to including my family in my business. I'm just getting started. And I honestly feel like it could work out. Like Javier said, I feel like building a life and a career or a business together is going to be a great experience. And I'm going to take the advice of Dr. Pinkston. I know even Ms. Val has mentioned about, because she works closely with her family, her husband specifically. I'm going to make sure that I have clear intention, clear goals, and set boundaries, and just make sure that I value the relationship just as much as business growth. So that is what I'm going to do. And, stay tuned. Maybe we'll be able to speak and share more down the line. So yeah, love the topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about you, Dr. Pinkston?
Oh, definitely. A great topic. But again, the experience is something that was earned, and it was earned hard. And so I do value my experience of working with family and everything, because it just showed that we can be big people, and that we are good people, and we've proven it. And it's been a nice road to watch this develop. I know that it's hard to trust people. It's hard to work closely with people that you're emotionally tied to. There's a lot of obstacles and difficulties about doing it, but it's not impossible at all. And again, just that communication is very important, the maturity of it, and being able to just forgive somebody in their space when they're not their perfect self and always capable. Just having that knowledge that their intentions were always good at one point. You do love and care about that person, and give them their space to be themselves, and let that happen. It's possible. Just be cautious, be smart, be cautious.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of like we said earlier, I think working with family can either make your relationship really good, or it can make it really bad. And, I'm going to be regurgitating a little bit here, but having boundaries and managing your expectations, and just ensuring that you aren't, in the end of the day, and everyone has different values, but we all want to be successful, and we all want to have a community of people around us that love us. And you can't let one ruin the other. And that goes whether you work with your family or not. If, even if you work completely, by yourself, if you're so career driven, that can ruin your relationship at times if you're not giving it that its own time and attention. And so I think in every aspect, it's important to separate and put your energy towards the things that matter to you, and managing, your expectations and how you react to things and your emotions and stuff like that, which I know something I'm working on is the emotional part of it. But I think that comes with experience and maturity, kind of like what you guys were saying.
Absolutely. It does.
Yes. So thank you guys so much. This was a great conversation. This is VK Career Conversations. We stream live once a month, you guys, on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. It could be the first Wednesday, it could be the last Wednesday. Just check out our social media. But if you want something a little bit more consistent, we do air the audio from these live streams on LVOVal Radio on every first Monday at 8 a.m. If you go to lvoval.com, you'll be able to tune in on our radio station. But thank you guys so much for tuning in live and giving us all of your comments. I love you guys so much. This was a really, really good show. And yay, we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you guys.